Hello, and welcome back to our X4 Foundations tutorial series. This is episode 13. We're going to be covering the personal tab. The personal tab, we've seen a couple of things in there before, but we're going to cover it in depth today here. Now, just one thing to be advised about, there are going to be some changes to this interface in the 8.0 update that is currently in public beta at the time of this recording, which is going to be updating all the diplomacy options in the game and actually adding a whole lot of possibilities that we haven't seen before in the next game. So some of this will change, and when that does happen, I will go ahead and put together an updated tutorial that goes over the new things, which I will link in the description. But until then, we are operating under version 7.60. Okay, so first thing to look at is, yes, here is the personal tab. Player information. Normally Shift-I. And the first thing you're going to see is the Empire, which allows you to pick your name, name your organization. Let's call you Tutorial Industries International. That works. You can also pick your logo. By default, there's a set of logos that X4 comes with that you can then add on to. There's some workshop options, and you can also download any random image that you want and put it into a specific folder. I believe it's in the Documents folder of your main drive, but I believe it's either there or it's in the actual X4 installation folder, but I'm not 100% sure. It's easy to track down. I believe that there's stuff in the workshop that'll help explain how to install those. So I've got a whole bunch more than is typical in the game when you start up. But we'll look here. Really, these are the main ones that come with the game. This first group up to here. So you can pick your logo, and then that will apply to your ships. You can also pick your default ship skin, so that every time you create a ship, this will be the skin on the ship that is defaulted. But you can always change that as you go when you're building a new ship, which again we'll go over in a future episode. And you'll also see your net worth, which includes the total value of all of your ships, total value of all your stations, the inventory that you have in your backpack, available cash, total cash and station accounts, and then how many people that you have hired and what their average skill level is. And then also whether or not you have any authority with the police, which in this case allows you to also identify which wares here you want to make illegal in areas that you control. But right now we don't have any stations, so of course we can't do that. Well, I mean, we could set it, but it's not going to do a damn thing. Okay, next up, this is Faction and Relations. Factions and Relations is, like I said, going to be dramatically different in 8.0, but this is what we see right now in version 7.6. Right now, at this game start, we only know 2 of the factions, but there is a long list of a bunch of other factions, different species, and different subgroups. And each one will have information about what level of your reputation you have here with this particular faction. So, for example, the Argon Federation, we're at +0. It can go up to +30 and down to -30, or maybe is it -20? It's some negative number. The Xenon are always at the worst, and that can never be changed. So I think it's -30. Depending on what your rep level is, that will determine what you're allowed to do with respect to that faction. And equipment licenses like the general use and basic modules and general use ship licenses, you can reach those. You can get those at -10. If you become friend to the Federation at +10, you gain access to these, which you can buy with a faction representative. And then you can pay for a police license, which gives you something to do with the police authority stuff here. Once you hit Citizen of the Republic, or Hero of the Federation, in the case of the Argon Federation, so this will be Friend of the Republic, Citizen of the Republic, Friend of the Federation, Hero of the Federation, and it'll vary based on the faction. Once you hit +20, then you get access to these other types of licenses that you can buy, And you can also get the trade offer subscription, which gives you full access to the trade values of all stations of that faction for all time. You don't need to have a satellite nearby, and you don't have to keep going by and checking it if you don't have a satellite. So that is really handy if you got that much money to spare to be able to see all the trade values of all the wares for all the stations of that particular faction. And then also you'll see a little bit of information here about the relation where you are in that particular process. So at +0, it says I'm allowed to dock. Ships and stations will not target me. And ships and stations will not attempt to destroy my property. I can't see the orders of ships belonging to this faction, can't teleport to stations of this faction, can't use their paint mods, and they will not send patrols to areas in which our assets have been repeatedly attacked. So they're not going to help you out if you get into a bit of a sticky situation. And then lastly, you can just declare war, and just everything goes just, well, pear-shaped at that point. Next up, we have statistics, which shows essentially a whole bunch of little bits of details that are fun to look at, but not critical for the game. For example, how long have we been playing? So 6 minutes, 23 seconds. How much time we've spent boosting, and so on down the road here. Accelerators discovered, stations constructed, countermeasures launched, all the way down to our trade rank and our fight rank, which is currently a harmless salesman. Next up is going to be our inventory. You start out with 0 inventory. I've gone ahead and created a game start where we have at least we have one of all of the possible inventory items. In this particular sector, which is an Argon territory, the ones in orange are illegal. And so if we move to another faction, the list of illegal items will be different. Argon has this set. The exclamation mark just means that it's a recent acquisition, which since we just started this save, that's what it's showing. Every single one here is a recent acquisition. And I'll briefly go in here and look at what they are. So damaged singularity engine, programmable field array, and one other, which I can't recall off the top of my head right now. It might be one of these 3 up here, but I could be wrong. Are used currently to craft the CETA device, which is one of the cockpit modes that allows you to fast forward time. That's changing with 8.0. It then becomes a research target once you have the player headquarter and have had a conversation with one of the characters there to be able to do research. So that is going to be changing specifically with 8.0, but for right now, you can just craft it at any crafting table in any station. Spacefly eggs, if you get a bunch of those, then you can use them to create Spacefly caviar, which is not illegal, but the eggs are, and each Spacefly caviar nets about 1 million credits. So it's pretty useful, but you do just have to be aware that they're illegal when you're carrying them normally. Then we have general wares, which is just a bunch of different things that can be used for buying and selling. You can craft some of these, like fine meals and first aid kits and so on. Then there are some security items here, the bypass system, decryption system, slicer. Here's the Spacefly caviar. These 3 here, the bypass system, decryption system, and slicer, are used on stations, which we'll talk about a little bit when we get to that episode about walking around on stations. You can use them to do things like turn off the ship's turrets, or blow out one of the ship's storage units and things like that. And then finally, there's trade wares, which you can just buy and sell. Or, well, mainly, you're going to be selling those. You're not going to be buying these. You collect these generally in loot that is dropped by other ships. And then there are these crystals within there. The Agilite crystal, Bandonite, Burnite, Menelaine, and Mitanine crystals. Those are found on some asteroids, typically farther away from the highway ribbon. It used to be in earlier versions of X4, they were a lot easier to find. They would blink brightly when you flew anywhere close to them. These days, essentially the drop rate of those has gone down tremendously, and they're not as easy to spot. They basically sit on asteroids, sort of like when we were looking at the mining episode when we were shooting bits of ore off of the sides of asteroids. They would be in that general same vicinity. They would be sitting there on asteroids, and you shoot them off. Then you would magnet them in, and you could then sell them for a decent amount of money. The Burnite crystals had the best value, but of course they were probably the most rare. But like I said, it's very rare to find them these days, and it's not typically something that people will go after anymore just because it takes a lot of time to find them, and they are not as lucrative as doing other things might be. I mean, maybe you could get a whole bunch of spacefly eggs at the same time, but then you're really just hunting for spacefly eggs at that point anyway. These items are not regular trade wares, so they do not get stored in the ship. They get stored in your backpack or in your pocket, and you can have essentially infinite quantities of these. They don't take up space, so they're just micro compressed into your pocket, and you can just take as many as you manage to get a hold of. Next up is modifications. This will show what modifications are available to you, ship mods that can be applied to ships once you've done certain researches that you'll be able to improve the functions of individual ships. Then you've got your spacesuit upgrades. You've got the various things that are in the spacesuit, so bomb launcher, hand laser, personal blaster, repair laser, spacesuit bomb, spacesuit EMP, spacesuit scanner, thrusters Mark II, and a sporting rifle. So the ones that you typically want, and in most game starts you already have the repair laser, and then you'll probably very quickly want to get thrusters Mark II because the regular thruster, which is default, is very, very slow, and the thruster Mark II makes it easier to travel around your ships, especially if they're big ships. It takes a long time to travel from one end of the ship to the other in the regular thrusters if it's like a cap ship or something like that. The repair laser is used to repair your ship. You get outside of your ship and just aim your repair laser at it. You can shoot the ship and it will slowly repair over time. Not a great idea for anything larger than a small, but on a small ship, it maybe just takes a few minutes and you can get back to 100%. Anything bigger than that and you're going to be there kind of all day. Next up, we've got the global orders list. This is fairly complicated, and I will not be going into it in detail right now. I will probably leave this for a future episode, but I have a feeling that I would be the absolute worst person to describe how this works. But essentially what it allows you to do is to set up special trade rules or blacklists. I say fire authorization overrides and alerts. The alerts are pretty easy, but basically, how do your ships respond to certain circumstances? So there are global orders that you can specify here. So for example, the default global response to attack is to use your judgment or retaliate or escape and deploy laser towers, like we talked about last time, or escape or ignore. And so you can set up your default standing orders. And then down here, you can also indicate various notification settings. Trade rules are used by, you apply these to specific ships, and I believe you apply them to stations as well. Could be not 100% sure on that. Could be wrong.
You're free to go.
What? Oh, someone's talking to me. Okay. And you use these to specify who is allowed to trade, who the ship is allowed to trade with or supply, and stations, whether or not they can sell ships to various different factions. And you can restrict all factions, which just means that you're only going to be dealing with yourself. Or you can say, well, I want to sell to everybody except the Paranid. And you can do that there. Blacklists would be for traveling through sectors or doing certain things in sectors or restricting trade, which determines whether or not ships can trade with certain factions. And then finally, you've got these fire authorization overrides, which allow you to determine whether or not you're going to respond or attack certain factions essentially by default. So the override under default will be affected by the global standing order, or you can override it and say, no, in this case, we're going to be chivalrous, which allows attacks on all military objects and defend from civilian objects, and so on. So like I said, I am not super comfortable with these, so I may have to take some time to really research that a bit more and understand exactly how they work so I can describe it well. I know how to use them more or less, but I stumble through it, so I'm not going to really talk about it at length right now. In fact, I am done talking about it, and we'll talk about it perhaps some other time. Okay, next up is account management. Right now, we don't have any stations or anything like that, but this is basically where we'll go to decide which stations get which amount of money for various things, for purchasing and building and so on. And you can tell it to accept all the estimates for all the stations that are requesting money, or you can specify specific amounts as you go. Next up is personnel management, which we'll go into in a bit more detail in another episode, where you'll get a list of all of the people who work for you and what they do, what their job is, and what their skill levels are. You can move things around. You can move people around from ship to ship. You can decide where you want everybody to work, and essentially just use this to control the employment of your organization. Then we have a transaction log, which will show the transactions relative to your stations and your buying and selling, and it will basically tell you whether or not you are making money or not. And then last of all, you've got a logbook, which will show all of the events that have occurred to you and your ships throughout the time that you've been playing. It can show general, mission-related alerts, news items, other alerts, upkeep, like having to add drones or having to crew a ship or things like that, or captain a ship, I should say. Various tips that may have appeared in the game, and then a ticker of all the things that were unlocked and stuff like that, like blueprints and various other economic elements and stuff like that. So you could just do the whole full list, but as you can see, sometimes it doesn't show you absolutely everything when you do that. So these are all very handy. The big ones that you're mainly going to be looking at will be inventory and global orders. Probably account management once you get far enough in and you've got a lot of stations. Personnel management will be fairly common. Oh, and then the last one I didn't mention was messages, which basically all your emails will come in here, and you'll see a note on that left side panel in the HUD that says, hey, you've got mail, and you can then go here and read all your mail. Okay, so that was a fairly short episode. I hope it was helpful. Thanks for watching. See you next time.